Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reflections from the Prayer of Recollection. Today is March 23rd, 2020. We're going to be looking at Luke 18:31 through 34. Here we go. Taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus said, "Listen, we're going up to Jerusalem where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him. But on the third day he will rise again." But they didn't understand any of this. The significance of the words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. So this is a really interesting section. A couple of reflections that I had this morning. One is that isn't it interesting that they didn't grasp what he was saying? And like, part of me thinks about times that I've heard things and they just did not sink in. I remember early on and along the way, especially reading Dallas Willard's writings, and hearing him talk about how Jesus took time, full days of solitude and silence alone with God in prayer. And basically, if Jesus needed to be alone with God in prayer, why on earth would I think that I don't need that time, that I'm somehow strong enough to be the transformed person that God wants me to be without spending time with him, when even Jesus needed that? So, I heard that, but like, it didn't sink in early on. And maybe it did in a little way. I started taking silence and solitude, small chunks every day. But the thought of taking large chunks on a regular basis, I just wasn't really willing to make that sacrifice. So I didn't really hear that. It just really didn't sink in. And I wonder if it was something like that, where they weren't ready to hear it and it didn't sink in because they couldn't accept that, or was this part of God's way of protecting them and playing this out the way that it needed to happen? Maybe if they had known what they were walking into with Jesus, what he was walking into, maybe they would not have been able to, who knows what, do what need just to even be there. Maybe they would have deserted, or maybe they would have fallen apart. Maybe they would have gotten more violent. Maybe it would have made Jesus's experience more difficult. They would have interfered. I don't know. I don't know what was going on there, but it is really interesting. And it's also interesting to imagine yourself being Jesus, and you've pulled your disciples aside. And what does that even look like? Are there thousands of people around? He's like, "Okay, you 12, you come over here. We're going to have a little powwow." So he pulls them aside, tells them all this. So he's clearly going to Jerusalem knowing all of this. He knows what he's going to face, the shame and the humiliation and the physical torture, and even the separation of God, the worst thing of all, being separated from God for the first and only time ever. And he tells them this, and they don't get it. So not only does he know what he's facing it alone. He has no moral support. Even when he tells them what's coming, they totally don't comprehend it. And sometimes, you feel more alone when you try to tell someone and try to get support, and then they don't support you and they don't get it. You feel more alone than if you'd never told them. And I think about how hard this must have been for him. And I don't know, at the same time, I think that he had to know that this was just a rope. This was not a snake. He was not threatened. But I don't know that took away his kind of his sense of impending pain. I don't know what that, and the coolest thing is that the hardest thing that he was going to face, like we were just talking about, is his separation from God. That was the hardest thing of all. That was the excruciating pain that he comes to wrestle with later in the garden. that, so what's kind of cool about that and so heart-wrenching is that he faced that part so we don't have to. We may face shame, humiliation. We may face physical suffering. We may face isolation and loneliness from people we love. But we will never have to face the most severe pain that Jesus did of the separation from God. And so, Jesus, I praise you and I thank you.